welcome to another episode of Asexualise, my asexual life for me and Eeyore. So don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Tonight we're discussing, or whatever time it is where you are, advice from asexuals to other asexuals, especially if you're new to asexuality. So welcome to another episode of Asexual Perspectives Awareness Month, Day 8, celebrating our diversity across the asexual spectrum and our differences within it. So tonight I'm going to be reading, or whatever time it is where you are, from Asexual Perspectives. And I absolutely love sharing these stories. So there's 47 asexual stories, including my own in this one. So don't forget to grab a copy on Amazon if you haven't already. And so, Robin's story. What advice would you give to others who are just discovering about asexuality and considering where they are or not? Finding yourself takes time, so don't rush it. Never rush. So I think that's very important, you know. So I have some people on this channel and they get very confused, and I know asexuality can be a minefield. So yeah, it can be quite difficult. So it's best to take your time and know that it's okay. You don't have to have a specific deadline for when you discover you're asexual or can define yourself within the asexual spectrum. It took me 3 weeks of research before I finally decided exactly where I fall in the asexual spectrum. So Nikki's advice: don't force yourself into any boxes. Labels can really help you sort out who you are and help you see who you are not, and help you see you are not alone. But the spectrum behind that label is so important too. For a while, I felt that I wasn't truly asexual since I wasn't really sex repulsed. I would say to explore the whole spectrum, and if any part of it resonates with you, then embrace it. There is no one correct way to be asexual, and I think that's important because not all asexuals are sex repulsed. I'm actually a sex repulsed personally, for me, asexual. But I'm not repulsed for other people who like sex, enjoy it, it's consensual, and you know, people like it. So I'm personally sex repulsed for me, but not for others. But just because you're asexual doesn't necessarily mean that you are sex repulsed. And I think it's important to understand there are different types of asexuals on the spectrum, some of which are sex repulsed, some are sex neutral, some are sex positive. So there's not a specific way that you've got to be asexual. So Dee's story and advice: don't have any sex unless you're confident you want it. I think this is a really important point. Also, don't feel the need to put yourself into a box one way or the other. Also related, just because you've done something before doesn't mean you need to do it again or do it with this particular guy. And I think that's so important because a lot of the time, if you've had sex before in the past, for example, people will be like, well, why don't you just have it again? You've already done it once or more. And that may be because you don't want to do it again, because you found out you were asexual and didn't realize it at the time, because society dictated to you that that's what you should be doing for a loving, caring, committed, happy relationship. And I am an asexual who has had sex in the past, not since 2011, and it's 2024 when I'm recording this now. So it's important to know that you don't have to fit into a tight asexual box, and you don't have to like worry if you've had sex before about you not being a valid asexual, because asexuality, I've got hair in my face at the moment, because asexuality is a huge spectrum. Now my hair looks really stuck up. So it's okay if you are an asexual who has had sex in the past, and even nowadays you identify as a sex repulsed asexual. I identify as a sex repulsed asexual, even though I've had sex in the past, which was consensual in my last relationship. I'm not going to say every instant was consensual. So yeah, I'm an asexual that is definitely asexual, right? So I know, looking back throughout my life, that I was also asexual but didn't realize it. That is evident from my past relationships when I was 6 years old and had my first heterosexual boyfriend, for example. I'm an asexual that has had sexual abuse in the past, as in some guy having unconsensual sex with me who was my boyfriend at the time. But that didn't stop me having sex. So I had sex after that with my last long-term ex, which ended in 2011. He was good at that and it was all consensual and everything. So I don't like the fact that people say, oh, you're just asexual if you've had sexual abuse or bad sexual experience. Yes, some asexuals have had bad sexual experience. It doesn't mean to say that's why they're asexual. In fact, asexuals are more likely to have sexual abuse because a lot of us don't want sex in the first place and we're not interested in it, or a lot of us will be coerced into it. So I think it's important to bear that in mind. So Hannah Lay's story, if you want to identify with asexuality, do so. There is no consequence to changing your orientation. It just might get a bit confusing for those around you if you change it daily. And ask questions. The more you know, well, you either get more confused, which can happen in the beginning when you're first discovering you're asexual. You can get a bit confused because the spectrum is so wide and varied, or things start to make more sense eventually. Also, ignore societal expectations. If you don't want sex, don't have it. I think that's a really important point. Pretty simple. And create an Avon account, as everyone there is really nice and helpful. So Avon is asexuality.org, which is the biggest online forum for asexuals. Hello, Jonathan. Nice to see you. They say that everyone's really nice on there. I will have to say that the majority of people are really nice on there. I'm not going to say everyone's really nice on there in my personal experience, but yes, it is the I'm part, you know, I don't go on there a lot, but Asexuality is the first forum I ever found about asexuality. It's the first mention of asexuality, and I was so relieved to find asexuality.org, otherwise known as Avon, because that's how I discovered I'm asexual in the first place, because I googled I love kissing but not sex, and it came up with asexuality. And then I saw asexuality.org, and I was reading through some forums there because some of them are public. You don't have to be a member to actually read all the forums. And it said there were people talking about wanting a romantic relationship without sex. And I'm like, oh, thank God there's someone else like me in the world, more than someone else, lots of people. I know not everyone's romantic, but the people I saw on there, I specifically was zoning in on the romantic ones, because obviously that's like me. You tend to look for what you are really in life, you know, so you'll look for people automatically with your brain that's like you, if you know what I mean. So wherever you go in groups, you'll always try and look for people to relate to that are similar to you, that have got similar interests, similar passions, similar views. That's kind of human nature. But I think it's really, really important that if you don't want sex, then don't have it, you know, because society does push us to do this, and it's really expected in a relationship, and it shouldn't be. I mean, I wish they would change the notion of what a relationship is. And like I say in my diary confessions book, that no one should be defining a relationship other than the people in it. I always keep saying that on this channel as well, because it should only be up to the people in the relationship. It shouldn't be anyone else to dictate. So that means if two people are different races in the relationship, or their ethnicities, or sexualities, or two different cultures, two different age groups, obviously not minors, I'm not talking about that, I mean legal age, this type of thing, like all the, you know, these type of things, differences should be welcomed. It doesn't matter. Love is love. And it's okay for two guys to love each other. It's okay for two women to love each other. It's okay for a transgender demi boy to love each other. It's okay, whatever gender and ethnicity you are. It's okay, right? And so I think we really need to be getting off the topic and subject as a society about heterosexuality is the main sexuality and sex is what it's all about. It's not. It shouldn't be. It's no wonder there's so many broken, failed relationships in the world, when they're so focused on sex and bodies instead of focusing on character traits and personality, and helping people to become better human beings, and helping people to heal their wounds and traumas, which affect relationships really badly. Instead, they're like, oh, have sex, that'll make everything okay. But no, it doesn't work like that. A lot of the time, people use sex as a band-aid. I'm not saying everyone does that, but there are quite a lot of people that do. There can be a couple of people, for example, in a relationship that have hardly anything in common, and the only thing they have that brings them together is sex. And I just think that must be such a lonely relationship if all they've got basically in common is the fact they both have sex with each other. It's just not good in my opinion. So I think there still needs to be a lot of change. Right, Sappho's story in asexual perspectives. What advice would you give to others who are just discovering asexuality and considering where they are or not? Take your time, especially if you're young. Asexuality is such a huge spectrum, which it is, with a vast wealth of identities. You might find yourself in one of them, you might not. And if you don't, that's okay too. Yeah, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to do a lot of research about asexuality, particularly when you're first starting out. One is this really helps you to stop being confused in and of yourself. You need to give yourself time to come to terms with the fact that you're asexual, most likely in the first place, but you're at exploration. You're at an exploration stage in the beginning anyway, so that's what you should treat it as. You don't have to define definitely as asexual when you're still discovering about yourself. And I think it's good to like become aware of the asexual spectrum rather than just one type of asexuality, because it is huge, and you can end up with different labels. If you're into labels, you can end up with different parts of labels, for example. So you could be a bi-romantic demisexual, for example. So you've got kind of two different parts to your asexual identity, if you like. So I think that's so important. And also because if you don't do your research, it can make you a lot weaker when you're talking to people who really aren't supportive about asexuality or really haven't heard of it before, who want to kind of talk you out of it, or who want to put you down about it, or who just want to dismiss it. The more stronger you are in your conviction of being asexual, the less likely you are to get people bothering you about not being asexual, or moaning about it, or putting up a fight or resistance. If someone's so confident in who they are, then why should anyone resist it or say anything bad about it? A lot of the time, if we're around people though that aren't helpful, they can in fact use psychological tactics to unfortunately undermine us so that we become less confident ourselves. And I hope that no one listening right now is going through that, but it does happen in families and with caregivers. It even happens in romantic relationships, so you have to watch out for that. There can be a lot of destruction that people cause, and I hope that you get someone who supports your asexuality. Don't ever be in a relationship where the person makes you feel like it's not normal to be asexual and there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with being asexual. Some people are asexual. It's normal for some people to be disinterested in sex or indifferent to sex, or not interested in arousal, not interested in genitalia. It's normal for some people to not get the need, urge, or want for partner sexual intercourse, and that is perfectly fine. And I've heard even in some groups of people getting into relationships with their partners trying to manipulate their mind and trying to make them feel like they need to see a psychologist because there's something wrong with them, the fact they don't want sex. And this is just so damaging. It's very narcissistic and emotionally abusive. And I hope you never have to go through that in your life. It's not pleasant. And people tend to target people who are different as well, people who are vulnerable, people who are different in a minority. And one of the things I don't like is when some guys, for example, heterosexual guys, will make you think you can't get anyone if you're asexual for a relationship, therefore you've got to have them because that's the only person that want you. This is very damaging, but I have to let you know about this. So if you are new to asexuality, don't let anyone speak to you like this. They're abusive and narcissistic if they're saying stuff like that, right? But these guys do exist, unfortunately. I'm not saying it's just guys. There can be any gender that's like this. And they do it to control you and manipulate you and try and make you want sex with them, basically by trying to make you feel bad that you're not having sex and there's something really wrong with you psychologically. It's psychological tactic, and it's really not nice. So what advice would you give to others who are just discovering asexuality? Zoe's advice that there are many people just like them. to go on asexual websites and read all they can about this orientation. I have some blog posts on asexualise.com in case you didn't know that, to get all the information they can find, to read it and let it simmer on the back burner if need be. That it takes time to learn about asexuality and discover how it applies to them, that the asexuality spectrum is very wide, and that all of this is a learning process that cannot be rushed. And one of the reasons why it's good not to rush is there can be some people who discover they're not actually asexual, but they didn't take enough time to read about it in the first place. So I think it's very important you take your time to read about it. There's a lot of people that say if the asexual label fits, then wear it. And I think that's good in some ways because it makes you feel like comfortable that you're able to just do that, which is a good thing. But I would urge everyone to research it first and make sure it fits before just sticking the label on themselves. One is it can feel daunting if you then have to kind of go back on your word. If you've just discovered you're asexual and then all of a sudden, oh, I'm not really asexual. If you just say, oh, I'm exploring asexuality, I think that's much better for you. And also, I don't like the fact that some articles, for example, even online, say it so casually, like asexuality is a coat that you can try on for size. It's not. It's a genuine sexual orientation. So I think, you have to have an element of seriousness about this. There needs to be some investigation and research on your part as to what asexuality is and exploring it. I think it's important to go for exploring phase for yourself personally and for the greater community. Therefore, you can be more confident when you're discovering about the asexuality spectrum that you do fit somewhere in it. I don't think this has to be a long amount of research, but I see some new people come to asexuality and then they start spreading myths around which aren't actually true. They just I would just read probably one or two posts. I would say don't just be around one person, or especially if you're listening to someone who's new themselves to asexuality, find some books about asexuality. I've got obviously books out, but you can find books that have been around quite a long time. Find channels like this one. There are other channels out there where they've talked about asexuality for a number of years, rather than just being a new person to the asexual community thinking they know lots of stuff when they might not, and be spreading information that isn't actually totally true. I do come across that. I actually came across someone a long time ago that had been growing an asexual channel and they just disappeared. They had loads of subscribers and they just stopped their channel all of a sudden and just removed nearly all their videos. And I think that anyone watching that must have been absolutely devastated. But some of the things they said about in their videos, I didn't totally agree with myself. And they had a huge following, more than, in terms of subscribers, more than I have. But for me, it's about quality of subscribers here and about my community that I really care about. It's not just about numbers. There's people that do perfect thumbnails for every single video, and you'll probably notice some mine are just raw, real me on them. And so everyone has their own style of doing things. But I would say do some research to get some comparisons between what different types of asexuals are and compare what people are saying to make sure you've got quite a good sound advice. So if you find out about an orientation, like watch a few videos on that orientation to make sure you really do understand what it's about, rather than just listening to one specific person, especially if that's a new person, a new influencer. If there's some, there's been channels that have been going around longer than I have about asexuality. Those are the channels other than my own that I would listen to, because you've been, you know then that they've got a history of understanding asexuality and the background of it, rather than someone who's like pretty new to asexuality, doesn't really totally get it, and they might have just been listening to other newbies. You know what I mean? I'm not saying all newbies are wrong. I'm just saying it's important to be aware of these things. So so Joel's story. Don't feel you have to define your asexuality in absolutes. You are not required to decide that you will forever and always like one thing. This week you might be interested in a boy, next time a girl, sometimes nobody, and other times everybody. You don't have to label yourself with a permanent marker. Sexuality, like life, is fluid. You may have hated broccoli as a kid, and love it now, or you may never like it. Don't force yourself into a box you can't get out of if you change your mind. So some people don't like labels, other people do. I think labels are useful if you're on dating sites and you're asexual, so that people can identify what type of asexual you are, so that they can see if they might be a match. So, for example, if it's a homo-romantic asexual, they're attracted to the same gender and they identify as female, and I'm attracted to the opposite gender. I identify as female, but I'm interested in guys. That's not going to be a match. But if they didn't put homo-romantic on there, and they're well, I wouldn't be looking at girls anyway, so I guess that's pretty irrelevant. But say it was a guy who put homo-romantic on there, that's more like I would find, because I wouldn't be looking at girls. So that was kind of a bad example. But so on asexuality.com, which I haven't been on active on for some time, but asexuality.com is a dating website for asexuals. Usually the guys they ended up liking on there were homo-romantics, so they were romantically attracted to the same gender, which was guys. And I'm a girl, so I just didn't fit into that. But had they not had that on their profile, then I'd have to go and have a conversation like, oh, so what gender are you into then? And so that's just like an extra step that I don't need to take if someone has a label. You know, if someone labels themselves. I personally like labeling myself because I just love my own label, because I kind of mix it up a bit. So I identify as a heteromantic asexual. That's my simple label. If I go into big labels, I'm a heteromantic asexual younger cougar who doesn't like sex, just kissing, and I have grey areas. Or I'm a heteromantic hyperromantic grey asexual, but not a textbook grey asexual. I don't experience any sexual attraction, so I got grey areas. It doesn't like sexual kissing. So I like putting the word cougar in there sometimes. People hate that. Some women hate that. Like, it was so demeaning, but I don't think it is demeaning to me. It just cuts out a lot of the older guys, or guys anywhere near my birth certificate age, that I'm really not interested in, you know. And so for me, putting that on certain sites and stuff like that is just a good thing. But I'm not active on dating sites anymore. I'm dating site detoxing at the moment, and I'm not actively pursuing a relationship anymore. So I do think, though, that what's quite shocking in this book, Asexual Perspectives, which you can get on Amazon, Blackwell's, Waterstone's websites, lots of other places, is a lot of the people in here do believe sexuality is fluid. I have a different opinion to that, but lots of people believe it is. And so, yes, it's interesting. And so this is advice from all different types of asexuals, not just me. And I think that's a good thing, because everyone is different. Everyone has different perspectives. So David's story. If you feel even a small possibility that you might be asexual, don't shy away from it. Don't get cold feet. There is so much information out there. Look into it. And I think that's so important, because there are some people that are scared about being asexual, and they're actually in denial about being asexual. So you've got some people that are actually like exploring asexuality. There's some people that come to the asexual community who are not really asexual. Surprise, surprise. They're impotent, or they've got a disability that stops them having sex, or they don't like the fact that they have sexual urges. I've had those people approach me, and I'm very careful about who I let into my groups. And so I think you have to be careful. You know, there's some people that have some sort of ulterior motive for being in the asexual community, shall we say, and that's not good. You do, however, get people that are asexual, but they're in denial. They don't experience sexual attraction. They don't get the need, urge, or want for partners' sexual intercourse. They don't look at someone and want sex with them, but they don't want to believe they're asexual because they think there's something wrong with it, or they think they're not normal, and they get upset that they won't have a normal relationship. And normal, as we know, is just a fallacy. Everyone's normal is different. But they do. I've come across it. Some asexuals really struggle. Some people find it hard to come to terms with the fact they're asexual. In fact, I haven't mentioned it much on this channel, but I have spoken about it before, years and years ago. Before I discovered I'm asexual in 2014, I used to follow a blog. So I've been blogging for years before I started blogging about asexuality, on my quirkybooks.wordpress.com blog since 2010. We're now in 2024. I've had that blog for 14 years this November. So it's been a long time. And I used to follow a blog, and that person used to talk about sex from an educational point of view. So one day I was commenting on their blog post, and that person did actually suggest about asexuality. They said, "Oh, I think it sounds like you're asexual." And I said, "No, I just don't associate sex with love. I just like the kissing." And that was it. I just denied it straight away. I didn't look up the word. I didn't like the word because it said asexual. I just hated the word because it had the word sexual in it. And I thought, oh, this is just disgusting. And I just didn't like the word, and I didn't know what it meant. And he didn't even fully explain what it meant. And I just said, no, I just don't like, I don't associate sex with love, and I just like kissing. That's what I said. And he's like, oh, okay. And that's what happened. And then a few years later was when I actually discovered I'm asexual. And I put a message in Facebook to let him know that he was right. But I think he stopped being Facebook friends with me shortly after that, because obviously I think he must have been a highly sexual guy who didn't actually appreciate having asexual friends. Jonathan, I personally do believe sexuality is somewhat fluid, partly because I believe the concept of sexual attraction has a high degree of subjectivity involved. Okay. I'm glad that you share your personal views. There's so many people in this book that believe sexuality is fluid. Yeah, for me personally, sexual attraction is just an innate need, urge or want for partner sexual intercourse, which I don't have. So I'm quite like fixed in certain ways, but I have changed my views on quite a lot of stuff since find out I'm asexual. So, I'm not, I don't believe, what was I going to say? So I was going to say, I don't believe necessarily everyone's sexuality is rigid, because I know some people have, as part of their actual orientation, it's fluid. So personally, for me, I don't believe sexuality in and of itself is fluid, but I believe there are some people that are fluid in their sexual orientation, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So, for example, even with asexuality, there's something called ace flux. And an ace flux has two meanings. One is someone who fluctuates up and down the asexuality spectrum. So sometimes they may feel like they're completely asexual, not sexually attracted to anyone whatsoever. And then they might go to being very on the grey sexual side of the spectrum. There's also ace flux, where people fluctuate between the asexual spectrum and the sexual spectrum. So they might experience any sexual attraction, then they go to the extreme and experience the normal sexual attraction back again. So ace flux is a real thing, and I've had some people that have never even heard of ace flux before. And so they say they don't want to put a label on themselves because they know that they're fluid in their sexuality. And they feel they're part of the asexual community, but they don't realize ace flux is a real thing. So they haven't got a label for what they are. But really, there is a label already, and that is their actual sexual orientation, is ace flux. Jonathan, I think the difficulty for me is how one interprets the grey areas. Yeah, Jonathan, it's very interesting you say that, because there's grey asexuals, and as you know, and the grey asexuals are split into two categories. This is where I go a bit deeper than quite a lot of other people do. Asexuals, grey asexuals come in two main categories. Those who experience sexual attraction, but not enough to want to act on it. So they still experience sexual attraction. But those also on the grey asexual spectrum, those who do experience sexual attraction, but only under limited, rare, or specific circumstances. But those would usually act on it. So you've got the grey asexuals that just don't experience sexual attraction enough to want to act on it. So they're they're non-acting on it, asexual, grey asexuals, if you like, and the other ones might act on their sexual attraction. So they got the capability, they got enough sexual attraction at times with specific circumstances. So demisexual is part of the grey asexual spectrum. So they only can experience sexual attraction when a deep emotional bond has been formed. That's how they are on the grey asexual part of the spectrum. Like, I have grey areas, but I'm not textbook grey asexual because I don't experience any sexual attraction whatsoever. In this book, actually, I redefine so there's grey asexual, there's grace, and there's grey A, that are all lumped into the same thing. Grey sexual, and grey grace and grey A. So there's actually 4, is all the same thing. But I redefine grey A to mean grey areas in this, because grey areas for me means I've got some sexual behaviour even though I have 0 sexual attraction. Jonathan, I think there's also a grey area of am I experiencing attraction or not? It might just be me overthinking, hyper-analyzing, hyper-analytical. Yeah, I think it's probably harder if you're on the grey asexual part of the spectrum to understand your grey sexuality. But am I experiencing attraction or not? It's like, yeah, I mean, I'm able to kind of separate my different types of attractions, and I've got a very clear definition of what sexual attraction is, and arousal is not the same as sexual attraction. But I do know that it can be difficult, because if you end up in a relationship with a sexual person, for example, and you're really aesthetically attracted to that person, then it might alter your view about having sex with them. Possibly. I'm not saying this happens, but it might alter your view of, and if you have a deep emotional connection with them, it might alter your view as well. So even though some asexuals will never ever have sex, ever, doesn't matter what partner they're with, there can be different connections with different human beings, and you might do more sexual stuff with one partner than you'd ever do with another you'd ever have, because there's a different dynamic, and I do think that plays into it. So I don't think there should be any shame in asking yourself, am I experiencing sexual attraction or not? I mean, even when I've been in a relationship or dating scenario, I'm always checking in with myself, like, are you experiencing any sexual attraction whatsoever, Sandra? Is this just arousal? Is it just like, if I'm in in my last short-term relationship, I was, checking in with myself, because I like to just be totally self-aware of what am I experiencing. But I wasn't thinking, I want to have sex with you because I've got the need, urge, I want for sex. I never had sex with him, and I kept myself covered up the whole time. The most he got was me having a towel wrapped round me when I came out of the shower, but he wasn't allowed to touch me at all like that. That was like the most naked chest, like just like you've seen on one of my shorts videos here. You know what I mean? That's it. I'm like, I'm not revealing my body. But I think if you've got grey areas, it's harder sometimes, because especially if you have a lot of other attractions for a person, like if you have aesthetic, romantic attraction going on, sensual attraction, you can have so many attractions that it can become a bit of a minefield as to whether you might have other attractions, and you might question yourself. But I think it's healthy to question yourself anyway. I think, asking yourself, am I experiencing sexual attraction right now? I think it's a healthy thing to ask yourself, rather than covering it up. And I think, if someone does identify on the asexual spectrum as pure asexual, then one day they find out they're not a pure asexual, they have great asexual tendencies with some people or certain instances, I think that's perfectly fine and okay. Because, someone who's identifies as pure asexual for years doesn't experience any sexual attraction. They might find 5-10 years down the line they're actually a demisexual. There might just be this one person in the world they've come across so far that they're sexually attracted to, and they've never had that with anyone else before, because they've just got such a deep emotional connection with that person, such a deep bond, and it's such a kind of unique dynamic, they might end up feeling sexual attraction, but they know they don't usually do that. And it might be very weird. I can't imagine what it's like really for someone to discover. I mean, obviously I can hypothetically imagine it, but I can't actually imagine like how strange it must be when you've not experienced sexual attraction for say all your life, and then all of a sudden you meet one person and you're just like, oh my God, I'm sexually attracted to this person. Like I want sex with this person. I've never wanted that before. What's going on? It must be very confusing and destabilizing maybe at the beginning. I don't know. I mean, if any demisexuals are watching this, you're welcome to put it in the comments. And I think it must be kind of really hard, you know. What makes it unclear is I don't think I have sexual attraction to people directly, but I might be sexually attracted or at least aroused by abstract situations, ideas, or presentations. Yeah, I think that goes on. I think that falls under the grey asexual spectrum anyway, I think. Do you identify as grey asexual, Jonathan? Because obviously there are people who are fictosexual, for example, they're sexually attracted to fictional characters. That comes under the grey asexual part of the asexual spectrum. And so I do think it's okay, you know, if you discover later on that you are something different or are on a different part of the asexual spectrum. I don't think you should put yourself in a box or label yourself and not have the courage later on to say that you're wrong or you've changed or you're different. I mean, I got into a short-term relationship. I wasn't meaning to get into a short-term relationship this year, but I got into a relationship with someone and they weren't who I thought they were, which isn't my fault. They deceived me and lied to me, you know, but it's my responsibility that I got into that relationship quickly, and therefore I didn't really understand that what they were doing in the beginning was showing me basically the acting version of them, not the real version of them. But I hold my hands up to the fact that I take responsibility for that, you know. And now I'm working on myself. I'm doing a dating detox. I'm coming to understand that I should take my own advice next time and definitely not get into a relationship quickly with anyone. And yes, and I'm in Matthew Hussey's Love Life Club now to learn more about relationships and stuff. So I try not to get into a relationship with that type of guy ever again. I'm not really sure what I identify as really. To those outside the asexual community, I just say asexual. About the grey areas, people don't need to know about that. Yeah. Yeah, there's demisexuals and grey asexuals in this book. So yeah, I think it's important to just know yourself more than anything. And obviously, if you do get into a relationship in the future, it's important that your partner knows as well. So like David said in the story that I read out a short while ago, if there's any chance that you might be asexual on the asexual spectrum, it is better to research it and not shy away from it, because the sooner you understand more about yourself, the better, really. I know so much more about myself since I came to the asexual community, and about my body, and about different types of attractions that I never would have thought even existed years ago. Like close attraction, for example, creative attraction. those are ones that not much talked about, but there we go. If you want to know more about different attractions, you can look at my 8 attraction series on my channel. So enjoy that. Right. So advice about being asexual, Katie's story: be confident in yourself, embrace who you are, and know that everything will turn out all right somehow. And I think this is really important, because asexuality is something you can be confident and proud of being. We are a recorded 1% of the population. That does mean we are more unique and nuanced than even the most unique people usually are. Everyone's unique in their own way. Everyone's special in their own way. But as we are a minority sexual orientation, it does mean that we're even more unique. And I like that. I like the fact that we're able to live a happy life without sex. We're able to be doing other things besides not having sex. And I like the fact that we can see relationships from a different perspective, from a different point of view, and that we can understand that sexuality is very nuanced in and of itself. That is something that's definitely apparent. Jonathan says, often I just use A-spec, aerospec, and leave the rest blank. Ah, okay. A-spec is like being on the asexuality spectrum, and arospec is being on the aromantic spectrum. So, yes, I identify as a hyperromantic, which is very rare, I think. Jonathan, I very much agree with you that it's all very nuanced. Thank you. Yeah, I do believe asexual is so nuanced, and that's why it's so hard to get an asexual match for a relationship. I mean, if I was going to a relationship, I much prefer to be with an asexual than a sexual person in general, because asexuality is, in my opinion, better if you can be with another asexual person in terms of relationship. However, because I am such a hyper romantic and a hyper kisser, it often, that type of person often goes better with a heterosexual in terms of they usually prefer a lot of kissing and romance and stuff, but obviously for them they want it to lead to sex, which is where the problem lies. I don't like that kind of, like, you're always kind of having to be a bit on guard. If, in my personal opinion, if you're asexual who's sex repulsed and you do get into a relationship with a sexual person, it can work out, I believe, but I think there is an element of, you've got to still make sure you're safe all the time. Do you know what I mean? You've got to make sure that you put your boundaries in place and stick to them, and also that you still have to protect your body. Like, if, like, the last relationship I was in, right, the guy was heterosexual, not asexual. He didn't lie to me about that, which I was glad about. But we were kissing and stuff, and he would touch, and like I would have to say no to certain places to being touched. I let him touch more of my body than I would usually let any guy touch. So I let him touch my bum, but in the end, I didn't really care about him touching my bum, which is weird because before that, I really did. Which is why I said you can end up having a different dynamic in a relationship with a different type of person. So whereas you might not been touched at all in certain areas with a certain person, you might be allowing more touching with another, for example. But there was certain areas like the front bit down below the front bit, I'm like, no, I did let him try something once and I started crying. I'm like, you're not ever doing that again. I did give my consent to it, but I'm like, I'm not ever having you do that again. It's like the top half thing, and I'm like, I don't want that ever again. I let him try it once and I'm like, didn't like it at all. I hated it. I'm like, no, that's it. I said, I know you might like to touch it, but you're not doing it because I don't want it and I don't like it. So that's it, and I think if I was giving advice about asexuality and being asexual, if you end up getting into a relationship with a heterosexual, please make sure you do not do anything you don't want to do and you're uncomfortable with. A relationship's supposed to make you feel good, not bad, and you shouldn't be crying in it. Do you know what I mean? So it's okay if you want to explore things and try something out, but you need to let the person know, I will try it this once. If I don't want to do it ever again, I won't do it ever again, and stick to that. It's very important. And it is difficult because sometimes you don't know what something's like, whether you like it or don't like it, until you've tried it with a person or tried it in a relationship. Sometimes you just know, and other times you don't. Because I used to have sex in the past. I used to be naked in the past with my ex. I used to have all body touching in the past. I used to have all of that. So I'm used to that. But nowadays, I say I don't like any of that. So yeah, Jonathan, agree with the message of setting definite boundaries and other communication, clear communication, you said. Yeah, it's so important. I'm very upfront about my asexuality. It does make it harder to get a romantic relationship if you're sex repulsed. I don't want to beat around the bush about that. It does make it harder, and it makes things more difficult when you like minorities within the asexual community. So, for example, a lot of asexuals I come across don't like much kissing. I'm a hyper kisser, and hyper kisser is rare for any sexual orientation in the entire world, let alone asexuality. It's very rare. So that makes things a lot harder for me. Hyperromantic is hard as well, especially with the majority of the asexual community being women, and I'm only attracted to guys, and there's more aromantic people, more asexuals that are not romantically attracted to anyone. So that is harder as well. So in terms of like kissing and the amount of physical contact I want, in some ways it's better for me to be with a heterosexual guy, but then you're kind of constantly a lot of the time on alert as to where they're touching you on your body. I think, I think the better person you get with characteristic traits, I think probably the easier it is to have a relationship with a heterosexual person. I think when you've got someone who's very sexual or who's not fully telling the truth, like he wasn't in the end, I think that's harder. And I think some sexuals will push you and keep pushing you. So you got to be very careful about that, And I personally am not looking for a relationship at the moment. I'm much better off being single. I'm much more confident again. That person, unfortunately, my ex, I didn't realize, or I didn't want to admit that he had narcissistic traits in the end. Because I don't like saying horrible things about people, but at the end of the day, it's true. And so the sweet, innocent guy that I thought he was, kind, caring, empathetic, and all this lot, wasn't actually the person he was in the end. And that's kind of sad, but it is the way it is. And you live and learn. I didn't think I'd ever be with someone ever again who had those type of traits, because I've been with them in the past, and I've even done videos on narcissists in this channel. But he displayed empathy in the beginning, sensitivity in the beginning. So I was quite fooled, because usually people who have got narcissistic traits are not empathetic, and they're not usually sensitive. And he used to admit when he was wrong in the beginning. All that changed, kind of flipped the opposite way. And so, yeah, it's really shocking how they flip like that. So that wasn't a good experience in the end, but I believe everything happens for a reason. I'm very, very spiritual in my life. And if I wasn't having that bad experience, I wouldn't be in Matthew Hussey's Love Life Club now. He's the world's #1 dating and confidence expert on YouTube, for example. He's the #1. I'm going to see him live next week in London, by the way. Haven't told you about that yet. I'm going back to London, people, but I've still got 2 broken bones in my back and my ribs hurt and stuff. So it's not the best time to be going to London. I already booked it before I was diagnosed with my 2 broken bones in my back. I'd already booked the hotel. I'd already paid for it and stuff. So I'll be very careful when I go up there. I know I'm digressing now. And it's going to be such a good experience. But if I hadn't had that painful relationship, then I would still be on dating sites right now, wasting a lot of my time, because I spent 10 years on dating sites, active on them, and I wouldn't be able... Well, I wouldn't have joined the Love Life Club that has got really good courses and stuff on there. So, and I wouldn't be so focused on my writing like I am now. And so for me personally, I've got my confidence back, because that person took quite a lot of my confidence. I don't like saying took it away, but yes, my confidence went down a lot with that person. Self-confidence. Not in some ways, I still was doing this channel, but I wasn't doing it as much, if you notice. And there was a lot of things that wasn't great. So I think you've got to be very careful. If you're asexual, not only have you got to take care of yourself asexually, but you've also got the big bad world out there as well. Not everything, every person in the world is bad, right? But there are a lot of guys, unfortunately. I'm just saying guys, but swap it out for any gender. This can be any gender, right? But there are a lot of guys on dating sites that are avoidant. There are a lot of guys on dating sites that do have narcissistic traits, unfortunately. And there are a lot of people who lie, unfortunately. I'm not saying everyone's like that. I'm not a liar. And that's why it's hard for me, because I tend to believe everyone is honest, and they're not. And I find it hard to believe that people lie. I find it really difficult. It's something that I really struggle with. Even if I've got evidence that they're lying to me, I still find it hard to believe they're a liar. I've got to change my mind on that, you know. I've got to be more like, this person's lying, that's it. But I like to, you know, I end up trying to think the best of people when really they haven't got good intentions, some of them, you know. Some of them are really good at you know, knowing straight away they're no good, and I just move on. But I think it's the ones that I become, you know, romantically attached to a bit, or aesthetically really are attracted to, you know. So just because you're asexual doesn't mean to say you can't be really attracted to someone. I think this is another difficulty, especially if you're new to asexuality. You might still get a lot of attraction for a certain person or people or certain gender, and you might think, am I asexual because of all this attraction? But you have to decide what a type of attraction it is, whether it's sexual attraction. So are you looking at the person and think, I want sex with you, I get the need for sex with you, I get the urge, it's like an innate need, I really need it with you? Or are you looking at them in terms of like aesthetics, like, wow, their face is beautiful, their skin is gorgeous, you know, that would be like aesthetic attraction. Or are you looking romantically at them, like, oh, I want to kiss them right now, I want to cuddle them, I want to walk with them, I want to do little sweet love hearts to them in the messages, all this type of thing. I experience in sensual attraction where you're wanting to touch their body, but it might not be leading to sex at all. It might not be any kind of sexual inclination from you. Don't forget, the other people or the person you're with can interpret this very differently. So if you're an asexual person who experiences sensual attraction, likes touching the body a lot, but doesn't want sex, you need to make that perfectly clear. Because to a sexual person, if you're touching their body, they'll think it's a prequel to sex, and they'll be expecting sex. Not that they should expect things like that, but they will. So you have to make it perfectly clear if you've got sexual behavior, because I have some sexual behavior, zero sexual attraction. You have to make it perfectly clear, this is the type of sexual behavior I have, but it doesn't mean I want sex. I might do this with you, but I don't want sex. You have to make that clear straight away, because otherwise they'll just get the wrong impression. And it's not necessarily their fault, because they're trained and conditioned to think in a sexual manner. They're not trained to think in an asexual brain manner. The asexual brain a lot of the time doesn't associate things with sex, which most people would. Whereas a sexual person will automatically think, hey, this is great, this is a lead up to sex, this is part of the foreplay. And you're like, no, this is the play. This is the only thing I want to do. I don't want it leading to something before that, you know? This is not the before leading to something bit, if you understand what I mean. So I think it's very important to set boundaries. It's very important to not do things you don't want to do. I think it's also equally important, if you want to explore things, that you let the person know and say, I want to do this one thing, I try it, I don't like it, I'm not doing it again. Now I might like to try this other one thing, or I'm prepared to do that. But, you know, they still have to ask your consent if they want to try that again. And they might try to do something without asking your consent, and that can lead to sexual abuse. So be very careful. Tell them, say, you have to ask my consent for that. And just because you've said you have to ask my consent for it doesn't mean to say you have to consent to it after they've asked you. Be very careful, because this is not a healthy relationship if they're trying to get you to do things you don't want to do sexually. And I think that's very important advice if you're new to asexuality, is to discover about yourself, find out more about the asexual spectrum, find out whether you believe you're sex repulsed, sex positive, sex neutral. It's always a good thing to kind of know about yourself. Maybe you don't totally know that at the moment. Speak to other asexuals in the community, read asexual books, watch channels like this one, and really find out like different asexual perspectives, like I talk about in this book, which is on Amazon, because it's a nuanced thing. Asexuality spectrum is very, very nuanced. And there's loads of subcategories that is just mind-blowing. There's more and more categories that come up every day because of the nuances. But it is difficult if you are trying to get into a relationship, because even with another asexual person, some asexuals, they might like completely being naked and massaging all over the body and stuff like that. I don't like being massaged on my body. I don't want a guy to see me fully naked ever. Like, even with the last relationship I was in, it's like, I'm not taking my clothes off. like it's not happening, so I'm not like stripping down so you see me completely naked. That's not what's going on. I did wear pajamas around the person. So yeah, I think you have to be very, very certain as much as possible. If there's something you're not certain about, don't do it if you're not sure about it. Wait till you've decided for yourself and don't let them coerce you into being otherwise. Right, South American Anonymous story. What advice would you give to others who are just discovering about asexuality and considering where they are or not? Well, asexuality is simple. You either are or are not. And there's nothing wrong with you. And you'll have to face bad opinions from other people with no shame. Also, love does not equate to sex. So, yes, I think this is very important. So some people will just say, you're either asexual, you're not. I'm very black and white in the way I think. So a lot of the time I will think in terms of like you're either this thing or you're not. I do, however, know asexuality is very nuanced, so it can be difficult to know exactly where you fit on the asexual spectrum. And I think it's important that this person says also love does not, I said equate to sex, but they actually use the word equal sex, the same sort of thing. And I think that is so important because you can love someone without wanting sex with them. You can love someone and be in a serious committed relationship with no sex ever. Love is not the same as sex. Some people have sex with people they've never loved and never will love in their entire life. It's just the sex they want. So just like someone can want sex with someone they don't love, someone can love someone and want a relationship without sex and feel that way forever. Love is about a deep emotional bond. It's about a connection. It's about communication. It's about great personality and character traits. You can have a soul connection with that person, a mental connection with that person, a spiritual connection with that person, emotional, aesthetic attraction. You can have tons of other types of attractions and connections with that person that doesn't have to involve sex whatsoever. And that can keep the relationship going. The fire's burning, as it were. I mean, if you've ever been so aesthetically or romantically attracted to someone, then you can like be totally into that person. Some people love person's personality. There can be some people that have crushes on someone because not just of their looks, but because of their personality. They just got an aura about them or an energy about them. And like, oh, I really want to be around that person. I really want to be close to them. I'd love to be with them in real life if they see them on TV or whatever, because they have this energy about them that isn't actually necessarily anything to do with sexual energy, although that is a thing as well. But they just like their persona, they like their character. So you can have a serious, loving, committed, healthy relationship without sex ever, based on other attractions and other connections. Asexuals love through a deep emotional connection usually, because we're not that bothered about genitalia or at all. We don't have to have sex, or the ones that do have sex don't usually have to have it to survive in a relationship. They usually have the other person instigate sex most of the time because they're not that bothered about it one way or the other in the majority of cases. I know there's some demisexuals who really do need a deep emotional connection before they can experience sexual attraction, and once they do experience sexual attraction, then it is very powerful sexual attraction. So asexuality is nuanced, like I said, and some asexuals find it beneficial to have a label, others find it too restrictive. So I think you've got to work out what works best for you. If you're not using a label and you are an asexual dating site or a website in general, I think you do need to be describing in your bio what type of relationship you're looking for, with whom, and how you identify as asexual if you're on asexual dating sites. Because I think even if you don't want to totally label yourself, I think it's good to say, well, I'm attracted to females, for example, if you are, or I'm attracted to guys if you are, because then it makes it easier for the other person scrolling through profiles. If you don't put much in your bio, it's not good because there's no conversation to start there either. So whatever dating sites you're on, it's good to have some sort of bio anyway, even if it's just got your hobbies and interests. But if you don't want to be bothered by someone asking you multiple questions, about where you feel on the asexual spectrum, what type of asexual you are, what gender you like, what don't you like, what type of attraction, all this type of thing. It can be easier sometimes to just say what type of asexual you are, or put in your bio the things you like and definitely don't like. Like, I want a girl, for example, or I want a guy. I don't want a girl because I'm not into girls, but it's best to put what you're actually after. This makes it easier for the person who's looking through profiles, plus it makes it easier for yourself to not get a multitude of questions in your inbox. And I think wherever you fall on the asexual spectrum, you should be proud of yourself that you're learning more about yourself. I think asexuality is an awakening to yourself. It's an awakening to your body. It's an awakening to what you like and don't like. You don't have to have all the answers. Sometimes you can only get the answers when you're in a relationship. And if you're an asexual person who didn't like sex or doesn't want it, never wanted it, then all of a sudden you realize you're demisexual, for example, and you do get the urge to have sex. I don't think you should feel ashamed of that or feel bad about it. I think you just have to recognize who you are and say, hey, I am this, didn't realize it. And that's perfectly okay. You can change your mind in life. You can discover things about yourself that you didn't realize in the beginning. So, hi, nice to see you. So, I think that's very important. So the first step I would say to someone thinking about if they're asexual or not is to watch videos like this. I've got tons of videos on my channel. This channel's been going since 2015. If you didn't know that, it'll be 9 years this October in 2024. So go and check out loads of my videos. Use the search button if you want to search for specific videos. You can ask me anything you like in chat. And that's why I do these late night shows. So you have exclusive access to me here a lot of the time. And learn about the spectrum as much as possible. When you feel you fit the spectrum in some way, identify as asexual. You can still work out what type of asexual you are whilst you're discovering where you fall in the asexual spectrum. You can give yourself time, but you can identify as asexual if you're pretty sure oh yeah, this sounds like I am asexual, but I'm not quite sure where I fit in yet. You can still identify as asexual like that. Of course, the person in chat, NK, is that how you pronounce your name? Says I'm bi-curious. That's good. Are you an asexual person as well, or are you just bi-curious? Because you can get bi-curious asexuals, and then you can get you can get people that are on the sexual spectrum, for example, that are bi-curious and they're not asexual. Anyway, you're welcome here. Any allies are welcome here who are respectful, So yeah, I think it's really important to embrace who you are in all your nuances. Very important. I think when you're coming out to friends, family, or other people about being asexual, I think say it loud and proud. You can you can use resources like this channel and books and blog posts and things like that to back up the fact there are genuine asexuals in the world. There are a lot of people who are asexual. So asexual, in case you didn't know, if you're new to this channel, asexual means absent of sexual attraction. Asexuality is a sexual orientation based on lack of sexual attraction. And so this book talks all about asexuality from 47 different asexual perspectives. You can get this on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Waterstones, lots of good bookshops. So if you're new to asexuality, go and grab a copy of that. It's a very interesting read. And there's lots of myths and stereotypes about asexuals as well, which I bust through in this book. So if you don't experience any sexual attraction whatsoever, don't get the need, urge, or want for partner's sexual intercourse, you'd be asexual usually. And it's a beautiful thing being different. Your difference is your beauty, and I want you to embrace that and know that some asexuals do masturbate, some asexuals do watch porn, some asexuals are into BDSM a lot of the time without the intercourse, some asexuals have kinks. So if you do those type of things, but you still don't experience any sexual attraction, you don't look at someone and want sex with them, you can still be asexual. So you can explore that. And yeah, just just read about the subject and topic and learn as much as you can about it. Being informed will help you be more confident and self-assured and enjoy being asexual. When you find out who you really are, it's like an awakening and like, wow, I'm so happy that I've discovered who I truly am. It's a relief that there's other people out there like us. No, it's great. So anyway, grab a copy of Asexual Perspectives if you haven't done so already. Like I said, it is on Amazon, but you can get this book from Waterstones, Barnes and Noble, Blackwell's, Walmart, even have it on their website. And also Diary Confessions of a Hyperromantic Asexual, 78 Life Lessons to Ace Your Life. These are excellent asexual books. Thank you for being in chat tonight, Jonathan. Always a pleasure to see you. And NSK as well. Nice to see you all. Thank you for everyone else that's tuned in as well. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you never miss an episode. And happy Asexual Perspectives Awareness Month, celebrating our diversity across the asexual spectrum and our differences within it. If you like this video, pop the thumbs up and make sure you are subscribed, because there's loads of people that watch this channel that aren't actually subscribers. So please hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you never miss an episode. Lots of love to you. Thank you so much. And take care. Have an ace day. Bye. Bye, Jonathan. Lots of love.